The title of this story manifested itself not as a headline but as a theoretical problem dropped on the desk of Eitan Cohen in the late autumn of 2013. The file, thin and bound in a mundane gray cover, was labeled Project Oasis. In the institutional language of Mossad, Oasis was a euphemism for the impossible, a reference to the Gulf states, specifically Saudi Arabia. It was a file no one wanted, a career dead end, a thought exercise. And Eitan Cohen knew it was a polite form of exile. Eitan was an analyst, not an operator. He was a man of texts, not of triggers. His office at the Mossad headquarters, nestled within the sprawling Glilot Junction complex north of Tel Aviv, reflected a mind consumed by data. Books on Safavid history, Persian poetry, and Shia jurisprudence were stacked precariously on every surface, competing for space with topographical maps of the Zagros Mountains and printouts of Iranian energy sector reports. At 52, Eitan was considered a relic by the new generation of cyber specialists. He was a master of the old game, a game of human sources, cultural understanding, and long-term strategic patience. But the world was moving faster, and Eitan, haunted by his vocal and ultimately correct warnings about the limitations of the Stuxnet program, arguing it would only make Iran's program more resilient, had been sidelined. He was too cynical for the politicians, too academic for the new directors. The air in Tel Aviv that autumn was thick with a specific kind of dread. The P5+1 negotiations with Iran were gaining momentum. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, was taking shape. In Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, this was perceived not as diplomacy, but as a catastrophic failure of Western resolve. Israel felt profoundly alone, betrayed by its primary ally, the United States, who seemed determined to sign a deal that, in Israeli eyes, paved Iran's path to a bomb. The atmosphere inside headquarters was grim, a potent mix of anger and existential fear. It was in this context that the Mossad director, a man known only as Dalet, had summoned Eitan. Dalet was a former Sayeret Matkal commander, a man of decisive action who had little patience for Eitan's nuanced, long-form memos. "The Americans are going to make a deal, Eitan," Dalet had said, pacing his sterile, glass-walled office. "They will call it peace. We will call it a delay. And when it's done, Iran will have sanctions relief, a legitimate program, and a clear path. We cannot stop this." Eitan remained silent. He had said all he needed to say in his reports. "So," Dalet continued, stopping to stare out at the coastal highway, "we need new arrangements. The Americans are pivoting. We must pivot too." He walked to his desk and picked up the gray file. "Project Oasis. You're the only one who reads history books. You're always talking about the Sunni fear. Go find it. I want a full theoretical breakdown. What would it take for the Gulf to see us as the solution, not the problem?" Eitan took the file. He understood the order. He was being sent to the archives, a ghost tasked with a ghost story. The assignment was a mockery. Go build an alliance with a nation that funds imams who preach our destruction. Go find friendship with a kingdom whose textbooks deny our existence. He was being told to map a fantasy. He returned to his cluttered office. The fluorescent lights hummed. He opened the file. It was empty save for a single sheet of paper with his name and the project title. It was an insult, but Eitan Cohen was a meticulous man. If he was being exiled to the archives, he would turn over every stone. He powered on his terminal, the green cursor blinking on a black screen. He would not look for friends. He would not look for peace. He would do as Dalet had asked. He would look for fear. And in the sprawling, paranoid, and wealthy kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Eitan knew fear had a name. It was the same name that kept him awake at night. It was Iran. The first line of his report began not with diplomacy, but with a simple query into a database of global energy conferences. The game had begun. Eitan bypassed the traditional channels of espionage. He did not request satellite imagery of Riyadh. He did not activate any dormant assets in Jeddah, knowing full well that Mossad's human intelligence presence in the kingdom was practically non-existent and astronomically high risk. Instead, he immersed himself in the digital ether, in the open-source world that the new generation prized but rarely understood. He operated on a single guiding hypothesis, that the Saudi elite, particularly the younger, Western-educated generation, was far more terrified of Iranian hegemony than they were of Israeli existence. The official rhetoric was for the masses. The private fear was for the succession. He lived in data. He cross-referenced shipping manifests from the port of Dammam with financial reports from London-based energy firms. He read the footnotes of obscure doctoral theses published at SOAS and Georgetown. He followed the digital breadcrumbs left by Saudi think tanks, looking for deviations in language, for the subtle linguistic shifts that signal a change in policy. He was not looking for a spy. He was looking for an intellectual echo, a sign that someone else in the vast Sunni world was thinking the same heretical thoughts he was. After 3 months of methodical, mind-numbing work, he found a name. Not a prince, not a minister, not a spy. The name was Dr. Khalid Al-Fahd. On paper, Al-Fahd was unremarkable. He was a man in his late 40s, holding a PhD in political economy from the London School of Economics. He served as a senior fellow at a state-sponsored think tank in Riyadh, but spent a significant portion of his time abroad, primarily in London, where he was a visiting lecturer at a prestigious defense studies institute. His public writings were dry, academic, and perfectly aligned with official Saudi policy. He wrote of Gulf security, the stability of oil markets, and the importance of the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. But Eitan, a man who understood the nuances of language as a weapon, read deeper. He read the subtext. He noticed what Al-Fahd didn't say. When discussing the war in Syria, Al-Fahd never referred to the opposition as terrorists. He called them Sunni rebels. When writing about Iraq, he spoke of Persian expansionism rather than sectarian conflict. His critiques of Iran were never direct, but were masterfully veiled in historical analogy, referencing the Safavid Empire's ambitions rather than the Islamic republics. He was a man signaling carefully to anyone who was listening. Eitan found his opening. Dr. Al-Fahd was scheduled to speak on a panel at a high-profile security conference in London. The topic was De-risking the Straits, Energy Security in the 21st Century. It was the perfect cover. Eitan still maintained his own academic legend, that of Dr. Elias Cohen, a dry-as-dust Belgian energy consultant specializing in pipeline logistics. It was a cover he had used perhaps twice in a decade, perfect for its sheer mundanity. He submitted a request for travel. His superior, a careerist named Yakov, scoffed. "London? For an energy conference? What are you going to do, Eitan? Bore them to death?" "It's about the Iranian angle on maritime insurance," Eitan replied, his voice flat. "It's for the Oasis file." "Ah, the fantasy file," Yakov grinned. "Fine, go. Enjoy the rain." 2 weeks later, Eitan was in the cavernous, over-air-conditioned ballroom of a Park Lane hotel. He wore an ill-fitting suit, carried a worn leather briefcase, and projected an aura of mild academic irrelevance. He listened as Dr. Al-Fahd spoke. The Saudi was smooth, polished, his English perfect, his arguments flawless. He spoke of risk, of tanker insurance, of the Houthi threat in the Bab el-Mandeb. During the coffee break, Eitan made his move. He approached Al-Fahd as the Saudi was adding milk to his tea. "Dr. Al-Fahd, a fascinating presentation," Eitan said, his voice inflected with a faint Flemish accent. "Elias Cohen, I consult on logistics." Al-Fahd smiled politely, a practiced, distant smile. "Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Glad you found it useful. I was particularly interested in your risk modeling for the Straits." Eitan pressed gently, stirring his own cup. "Your models seem to overwhelmingly focus on non-state actors, the Houthis, Al-Qaeda, but you barely mentioned the most significant state actor in the region, the elephant in the room." Al-Fahd's eyes, dark and intelligent, sharpened. He stopped smiling. He studied the Belgian academic for a moment too long. "Our models are based on declared threats, Doctor. Iran, for all its rhetoric, has not officially declared an intent to close the Straits." "Ah, but intent is a fluid thing, is it not?" Eitan said, holding his gaze. "One might argue that capability is the only true metric, and their fast boat capabilities, their missile emplacements, they are not building them for parades." The two men stood in silence for a moment, the din of the conference fading around them. The tension was palpable, a silent, intellectual duel. Al-Fad gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He looked down at his tea. "You are Belgian, you said? A long way from home." "Brussels is a city of arrangements, Doctor. One learns to see the world as it is, not as one wishes it to be." Khalid Al-Fad took a sip of his tea. His voice was low, meant only for Aitan. "A wise man once told me," he said, not looking at Aitan, "that sometimes the neighbor you fear is better than the neighbor who wants to burn your house down." He then nodded, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of diplomats and executives. Aitan stood perfectly still. His heart was hammering in his chest. The neighbor you fear. It was not a casual remark. It was a key, inserted into a lock he hadn't known existed. The gravity of the situation was not yet clear, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was not an academic debate. It was an invitation. Aitan returned to Tel Aviv in a state of controlled agitation. He filed a mundane travel report, filled with jargon about insurance premiums and maritime risk, and attached it to the Project Oasis file. He mentioned his brief conversation with Dr. Al-Fad, burying it in a paragraph about networking contacts. To his superiors, the trip was a bust, another dead end for the ghost in the archives. This was precisely what Aitan wanted. He could not use Mossad's primary systems for what came next. To task assets to investigate Al-Fad now would raise flags, attract Yakov's attention, and bring the entire fragile endeavor under a spotlight it could not survive. He moved his research to a sandboxed terminal, a secure air-gapped system reserved for the most sensitive blue sky analysis, a digital room so secret that few even knew it existed. Here he began to pull the thread. He ran the name Khalid Al-Fad against a different set of databases. Not academic citations, but flight manifests, hotel registries, and financial intelligence from cooperating European agencies. He was no longer profiling an academic. He was building a map of a man's life, looking for the nodes of power he connected to. The pattern that emerged was staggering. Dr. Al-Fad did indeed lecture in London, but his trips to London often coincided with private, unannounced visits to the same city by senior figures from the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, GID. His travels to Washington, D.C. were not just for think tank panels. They were followed by quiet, off-the-books meetings at private estates in Langley, Virginia. But the real revelation came from a deep dive into Saudi royal family genealogy, a complex and Byzantine chart of bloodlines and allegiances that Aitan had studied for years. Khalid Al-Fad was not just a commoner who had earned a PhD. His grandmother was from a minor, but respected branch of the Al Saud family. This lineage made him a trusted cousin, a man who could operate outside the formal power structure, an intellectual who was also, by blood, an insider. And who was his primary patron? Aitan traced the funding for Al-Fad's think tank, followed the internal appointments, and cross-referenced mentions in diplomatic cables leaked years earlier. The thread led consistently to one place, the office of the governor of Riyadh, a position then held by a man named Salman bin Abdulaziz. More specifically, it led to the governor's favorite son, a young, ambitious, and at that time, relatively unknown prince who was building his own power base, a man who served as the gatekeeper to his aging father's court. The name was Mohammed bin Salman. Aitan sat back, the blood draining from his face. This was not a feeler from a disenfranchised academic. This was not a low-level probe. This was a sophisticated, deniable, and incredibly high-level overture from the very heart of the Al Saud succession. Dr. Al-Fad was a messenger, a cutout of the highest order, sent by a young prince who was already planning for a future in which he would rule, a future where he saw Iran as the primary obstacle to his power. The realization settled on Aitan with crushing weight. Project Oasis was no longer a theoretical file. It was a live operation, potentially the most significant in Mossad's history. And he, Aitan Cohen, the sidelined analyst, was the sole point of contact. His actions now had consequences that defied imagination. A single misstep could expose the Saudi prince, sparking a succession crisis in the kingdom that would destabilize the world's oil supply. A leak would not just end his career, it would be used by Tehran as proof of a Zionist Saudi conspiracy. a propaganda victory worth more than a dozen battleships. The neighbor you fear was not a philosophical statement. It was a direct reference to Israel. And the neighbor who wants to burn your house down was Iran. Eitan locked his terminal. He suddenly felt the oppressive silence of the headquarters around him. He felt the eyes of every analyst, every guard, every cleaner. He was holding a secret that could start a war or just possibly end one. As he was packing his briefcase to go home, his personal encrypted device, a device he used only for secure off-network communication, buzzed. It was an email from a Proton-based address, a ghost account. He had given this address to no one. The message contained only one line. Your views on Belgian energy are incomplete. Perhaps we could discuss them further. Geneva, Hotel du Lac, Friday. There was no signature. There was no need. The suspense was over. The test had been passed. The real meeting was being called. Eitan Cohen now faced a choice that defined the line between analysis and action. To go to Geneva without authorization was to become a rogue agent. To request authorization was to kill the operation before it began. He could not walk into Director Dalet's office and say, "A Saudi academic, who I believe is a cutout for a junior prince, sent me a cryptic email, so I am going to Geneva." Dalet would have him committed or fired. He needed a pretext. He found one in the financial intelligence databases. A small Lebanese-based import-export company, long suspected of being a front for Hezbollah procurement, had an account at a private bank in Geneva. Eitan fabricated an urgent need to meet a human asset, a source inside the bank. It was a plausible, if thin, cover. He cornered Dalet in the hallway. "Sir, I have a potential break in the Hezbollah financing case. A source. I need to go to Geneva, quietly." Dalet, preoccupied with the Syrian front, waved him on. "Fine. But Eitan," he said, his eyes cold, "don't waste my time. Bring me something real." Eitan flew to Geneva on a commercial flight, traveling as Elias Cohen. He checked into a cheap hotel near the train station, a world away from the five-star Hotel du Lac. For a day, he moved through the city, a ghost practicing his tradecraft, checking for surveillance, doubling back, clearing himself. He detected nothing. Either they were amateurs, or they were supremely professional. He suspected the latter. On Friday, at the appointed hour, he entered the lobby of the Hotel du Lac. The air was thick with the scent of old money and fresh flowers. He went to the bar, ordered an espresso, and waited. A man in a sharp European-cut suit approached him. "Dr. Cohen, your table is ready." Eitan followed him, not to the restaurant, but to a private elevator. They ascended in silence. The man used a key card to open a penthouse suite. "Please," the man said, gesturing him inside. The room was vast, with a sweeping view of the lake. Dr. Al-Fad was not there. Seated in an armchair, silhouetted against the window, was an older man. He was dressed not in a suit, but in an immaculate white thobe and gutra, the traditional Saudi headdress. He looked to be in his 60s, with a trimmed gray beard, sharp, predatory eyes, and an aura of absolute, unquestioned authority. This was not an academic. This was not a messenger. This was power. "You are not Elias Cohen," the man said, his voice a gravelly baritone. His Arabic was pure, classical. Eitan's blood ran cold. This was the test. He met the man's gaze and replied in the formal Arabic he had learned from texts, not from the street. "And you are not the man I was expecting to meet." The man smiled, a thin, cold smile. "Names are for friends, and we are not friends. Sit." Eitan sat. The man was a patriarch, a figure of immense power, likely a senior prince from the GID, Saudi intelligence. This was the true confrontation. "You are from Glilo," the man stated. It was not a question. "Your file on Persian history is impressive. Your analysis of their maritime doctrine is, I am told, accurate. You understand the disease. It is a disease that threatens all of us." Eitan said, his voice steady. "It threatens us, yes," the Saudi corrected. "It threatens our stability, our succession, our faith. You," he gestured dismissively, "you are merely an irritant." a theological problem. But the Persians, he leaned forward, his eyes burning with a cold fire. They are an existential threat. They wish to see the black flag fly in Mecca. They wish to see my family hanging from cranes. This we cannot abide. The room was heavy with silence. Eitan waited. Dr. Al-Fad is an idealist, the man continued. He speaks of neighbors and houses. I am a realist. We are not friends. We will never be friends. Your flag will never fly in Riyadh. Our interests do not align. They collide. Except for one, Eitan said. The man nodded. Except for one. So, here is the situation. We will not talk about peace. We will not talk about normalization. We will not talk about the Palestinian problem. Any man who utters those words in this room will be a liar. We will talk about one thing and one thing only: the disease. He laid out the terms. It was not an offer of alliance. It was a transaction, cold and brutal. We have a problem in Yemen. The Houthis are receiving guidance from Quds Force advisors. We have a problem in Syria. The IRGC is building a land bridge to Beirut. We need to know what they are doing. We need data. You have this data. And what do we receive? Eitan asked. You receive silence. You receive stability. You receive an assurance that the 5,000-mile front is not your only front. We will share what we know of their movements in Africa. We will share what we hear from our friends in Pakistan. We will give you a window into a world you cannot see. And in return, you will give us what we need to fight our war. No one ever knows this meeting happened. No one ever knows this channel exists. This was the choice. This was the moment that would define his life. His mandate from Dalet was to explore. The man in front of him was demanding he commit. He was being asked to formally align Israeli intelligence with Saudi military objectives, a decision that should be made by prime ministers, not analysts. This is a significant proposal, Eitan said, choosing his words with care. It is not a proposal, the Saudi said, standing. It is the new reality. Do you have the authority to accept reality, or are you just a historian? Eitan looked out at the placid lake. He thought of the file on his desk, of the map in his office, of the existential dread in Tel Aviv. He was alone. He had no authority, but he knew what Dalet had said. Bring me something real. I accept the reality, Eitan said. The Saudi nodded once. Good. Dr. Al-Fad will be your point of contact. You will never see me again, and you will never speak of this, not even to your superiors. You will feed them what they need to know, nothing more. This channel belongs to you, and to us. He walked to the door, leaving Eitan alone in the suite. The confrontation was over. The alliance, such as it was, had been born. Eitan returned to Tel Aviv a changed man. He was no longer just an analyst. He was a compartment within a compartment, a secret hidden from his own organization. He briefed Dalet on his Geneva trip, but he followed the Saudis' instructions. He told his director that the Lebanese financing lead was a dead end. He said his banking source had failed to show. He painted the trip as a complete failure. I told you not to waste my time, Eitan, Dalet had said, his disappointment clear. I know, sir. It won't happen again. Eitan's portrayal of failure was his first act of loyalty to his new invisible ally. He insulated the channel with his own professional disgrace. He was now free to operate Project Oasis from the shadows, his superiors believing the file was exactly what it had always been, a theoretical waste of time. The channel was activated 1 week later. An encrypted email arrived from Dr. Al-Fad. It contained no text, only an attachment, a satellite image file, heavily compressed. It showed a desolate stretch of coastline in Sudan, north of Port Sudan. The image was commercially available, low resolution, but embedded in the file's metadata were a set of coordinates and a date, 3 days from now. Eitan understood. This was the first test, the proving ground. The Saudis were giving him a target. It was a gift, but it was also a trap. If the intelligence was good, Israel would act, proving its capability and its willingness to share the benefits of its action. If the intelligence was bad, a dangle designed to make Israel expend resources or, worse, strike a civilian target. The channel would be exposed as a Saudi provocation, and Eitan would be finished. He opened his secure terminal and tasked one of Israel's high-resolution imaging satellites to swing its orbit over the Sudanese coordinates. The request was routine, buried among dozens of other requests for imagery of Syrian and Lebanese targets. No one would question it. The image that came back hours later was crystal clear. It showed what the low-resolution image had not: fresh tire tracks leading from a coastal road to a small, concealed cove. Awaiting him there, partially hidden by camouflage netting, was a small, unmarked coastal freighter. Eitan's team, a small, hand-picked unit of analysts within his own department who knew nothing of the source, got to work. "What is this, Chief?" asked Amir, his young, brilliant protege. "A tip," Eitan said vaguely. "From a source in Khartoum. Let's assume it's an Iranian shipment. What is it?" For 72 hours, the small office became a pressurized tank of intellectual combat. They ran signals intelligence, SIGINT sweeps on the area, trying to pick up any radio chatter. They cross-referenced the freighter's silhouette against their databases. They ran its transponder logs, which were expectedly faked. "It's a ghost ship, Eitan," Amir said, rubbing his eyes after 36 hours. "It doesn't exist. The crew is running dark." "Keep digging," Eitan ordered. The ordeal was a new kind of battle for Eitan. It was not a physical test of endurance, but a grueling mental marathon fought with data points and shadows. He felt the weight of his decision in Geneva. If he was wrong, he was burning a vital Israeli satellite asset on a wild goose chase. If he was right and failed to prove it, the Saudis would dismiss the channel as incompetent. On the final day, with the deadline approaching, Amir burst into his office. "I found it. I found the discrepancy." He pulled up a manifest from the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas from 3 weeks prior. It listed a shipment of agricultural machinery bound for Mombasa. But the ship listed, the Marjan, had a unique hull design. "Now look at our ship in Sudan," Amir said, pulling up the satellite photo. "It's the Marjan. They faked the transponder, but they didn't change the ship. They're not offloading tractors, Eitan. Based on the crane activity, I think they're C-802 coastal defense missiles, destined for Hezbollah or maybe the Houthis." Eitan felt a cold rush of adrenaline. The Saudi intel was good. It was grade A, actionable intelligence. He picked up his secure phone and made a call to the office of the Air Force chief. He did not explain the source. He simply said, "Unit 8200, Israel's SIGINT unit, has identified a high-priority Iranian arms transfer at the following coordinates. The target is a freighter, the Marjan. The window is 12 hours. Eitan did not see the operation. He was not cleared for it. He simply went home, sat on his balcony, and waited. At 3:00 a.m., his personal device buzzed. A new email from Dr. Al-Fad. "A commendable analysis of the Belgian energy market, Dr. Cohen. It seems your logistics data was correct. The shipment has been delayed indefinitely." Eitan closed his eyes. He had passed the test. The Saudis had provided the tip, and Israel had provided the muscle. The alliance had been consummated with a successful, deniable strike. He had proven his value, and more importantly, he had proven the channel's legitimacy. He was no longer just an analyst. He was the sole conduit for the most explosive secret in the Middle East. The years 2014 through 2016 were a blur of shadows. The channel, now solidified by the success in Sudan, became a silent humming engine at the center of Eitan's life. The relationship operated on a simple, brutal economy: intelligence for intelligence. Eitan's small unit became a clandestine cell, parsing cryptic data from Oasis and feeding their own SIGINT and human intelligence back through the secure digital channel. They shared information on ISIS financing routes through Iraq, on Quds force movements in Damascus, and on Houthi command structures in Saada. To his superiors, Eitan Cohen had become ruthlessly efficient, a man who suddenly began producing a steady stream of high-value, unexplained intelligence. "Eitan's ghosts," Daylet called his sources, and left it at that, satisfied with the results and smart enough not to ask questions that Eitan clearly would not answer. The alliance was transactional, cold, and effective. But it was about to reach its limit, the moment where a transaction becomes a true binding commitment. The crisis came in the winter of 2016. Mohammed bin Salman was now deputy crown prince, rapidly consolidating power and prosecuting a brutal high-stakes war in Yemen. The war was going badly. The Houthis were resilient, and their Iranian-backed commanders were running circles around the Saudi-led coalition. An urgent message came from Al-Fahd. It was not a polite feeler. It was a desperate three-alarm fire. "The architect is in Sana'a. We are blind. You must find him." Eitan knew the name. The architect was a call sign for Major General Qasem Rostami, a high-ranking Quds Force commander, a logistics and asymmetric warfare genius who was to the Yemen campaign what Qasem Soleimani was to the entire region. He was a ghost, a master of operational security, a man who never used a cell phone, never traveled with an entourage, and never stayed in one place for more than a few hours. He was in Yemen to coordinate a massive surprise offensive that the Saudis feared could break their blockade of the port of Hudaida, a catastrophic strategic defeat. The Saudis were coming to Eitan not just for a tip, but for a kill. They were asking Mossad to find a man so they could assassinate him. The alliance hung in the balance. If Eitan failed, the Saudis would see the channel as a fair-weather arrangement, useful for secondary targets but useless in a crisis. They would close it. For 48 hours, Eitan's team tore the digital world apart. They had nothing. Rostami was invisible. The satellite feeds showed nothing. The SIGINT intercepts from Yemen were just noise. Failure was looming, a heavy, suffocating blanket. "He's not there, Eitan," Amir said, his face gray with exhaustion. "No phone, no radio, no email. He's a ghost." "Then we are not looking for the man," Eitan said, his mind racing. "We are looking for his shadow." "What does he need to command?" "He can't run an offensive with smoke signals. He needs a hub, a communication center. He needs to receive reports and give orders. Find the hub." The team shifted its focus. They stopped looking for Rostami and started looking for anomalies. They scanned Sana'a for new, high-bandwidth data transmissions, for unusual bursts of encrypted radio traffic, for the sudden appearance of new fiber optic nodes. At the 11th hour, Amir found it. A new, powerful microwave transmitter had been activated on the roof of a nondescript office building in a residential neighborhood of Sana'a. It was broadcasting in short, coded bursts, aimed at a relay in the mountains. "It's him, Eitan," Amir whispered. "He's not in the building, but his ear is. This is his command and control. He must be nearby, receiving the data through a hard line." This was the climax. Eitan had a choice. He could provide the location of the communications hub, which was a clear military target, or he could hold back, protecting a prized Israeli intelligence capability, the ability to identify such specific high-tech signals. Giving this to the Saudis would be like giving away a key to the kingdom. It would show them exactly how Israel spied. But failure was not an option. Eitan looked at the coordinates on the screen. He finally understood the true weight of his actions. He was about to become a direct participant in the Saudi war. He was crossing the line from passive intelligence sharing to active targeting. He sent the message to Al-Fahd. It contained only the coordinates and a single word: hub. He went home. He did not sleep. He watched the international news feeds. 3 hours later, at 4:15 a.m. Tel Aviv time, a news alert flashed. Reports of a massive, precise explosion in Sana'a. Eyewitnesses report a multi-story building completely destroyed. The Houthi offensive, planned for the next day, sputtered. It dissolved into chaos, a series of uncoordinated, easily repelled attacks. The architect had been deafened. A day later, the email from Al-Fahd arrived. "The disease in Yemen has been contained. Your technical insights are invaluable." Eitan closed his eyes. The small symbolic victory was complete, but it was more than that. The alliance was no longer just a transaction. It had been sealed in shared action. It was now a partnership. Years passed. The world changed, and the alliance that Eitan had built in secret became the invisible scaffolding that supported a new Middle East. Mohammed bin Salman consolidated his power, becoming the crown prince and de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. The JCPOA was signed, and later abandoned by the United States. ISIS was defeated. The disease of Iran, however, remained. The channel, once a desperate improvisation, was now institutionalized. It was no longer just Eitan and Al-Fad. It was a high-level, permanent, and deniable line of communication between the Mossad director's office and the Crown Prince's court. Eitan himself was no longer a sidelined analyst. He was a senior advisor, a gray eminence, who walked the halls of headquarters with a quiet authority that baffled those who didn't know his secret. In 2018, he was summoned for a final judgment. The message came from Al-Fad, but the location was not Europe. It was a neutral Gulf state, a gleaming city of glass and steel that served as the new crossroads of the world. Eitan traveled on a black diplomatic passport under a new name. He was escorted from the airport to a royal palace on a private island. He was shown into a vast, modern majlis decorated with contemporary art. Dr. Al-Fad was there, older, more confident, dressed in a sharp Western suit. But he was not the one Eitan was there to see. Standing by the window, looking out at the turquoise water, was the man from the Geneva hotel suite. The patriarch. The years had been kind to him. He was now one of the most powerful intelligence chiefs in the world, the right hand of the Crown Prince. Eitan, the Saudi chief said, turning. He used his real name for the first time. It has been a long time since Geneva. It has, Eitan replied. You have kept your word, the Saudi said, and we have kept ours. The disease is in remission, but it is not cured. Your information, your capability, has been effective. It has saved lives, Saudi lives, and I suspect, Israeli lives. This was the judgment, the assessment of his transformation. Dr. Al-Fad, the secondary character who had started it all, stepped forward. In London, you spoke of arrangements. We have built a significant arrangement. We have proven that two neighbors can, indeed, build a taller fence against a common fire. The tension in the room was one of finality. The mission was a success. The alliance was stable. But Eitan had to ask the final question. And what now? Eitan asked. The world sees change. The Crown Prince is a reformer. Is it not time for this arrangement to evolve? The Saudi chief's face hardened. The brief warmth vanished. Evolve? You mean a flag in Riyadh? A handshake on your White House lawn? You misunderstand the reality, Eitan, even now. He walked closer. This, he gestured between them, this is necessary. It is a transaction based on survival. What you ask for is politics. It is sentiment, and sentiment has no place in this room. This alliance will continue precisely because it is a secret. The moment it becomes public, it is worthless to me. It becomes a weapon for my enemies, both internal and external. You will remain our secret, Eitan, our most effective and most necessary secret. The judgment was final. The alliance would continue, but it would remain forever in shadow. There would be no normalization. There would be no peace treaty. There would only be the cold, hard logic of the transaction. Eitan had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, only to find that his success was its own prison. Eitan returned to Tel Aviv. He submitted his final report for Project Oasis, a single-page summary for Director Dalet's eyes only, which Dalet read, nodded, and then personally fed into a burn bag. Eitan was now a senior advisor to the director, a man respected for his wisdom, but profoundly isolated by the secret he was forced to keep. He would walk the halls, and the new young analysts would whisper, wondering what the old historian actually did. He could never tell them. He often stood in his office looking at the large map of the Middle East that still hung on his wall. It was a map that was now obsolete. Where he once saw a sea of intractable enemies, he now saw a complex, invisible web of arrangements, channels, and transactions. He saw the flight paths of Israeli planes taking indirect routes to Asia, routes that were only possible because of silent, over-the-horizon permissions. He saw the shared data on tanker movements in the Red Sea. He saw the quiet, joint pressure on mutual enemies. The desfecho was not one of celebration. There was no parade, no medal. The emotional resolution was a quiet, weary acceptance. Eitan had sought to protect his nation, and he had succeeded. But to do so, he had sacrificed the dream of peace, the public, celebrated, handshake on the lawn peace that his nation craved. for the reality of security. He had traded the warmth of public friendship for the cold, functional, and far more effective partnership of the shadows. He had built a bridge, not of friendship, but of cold, hard, and necessary logic, proving that in the new Middle East, survival was not about who you loved, but who you hated together. This fragile understanding, born in shadow and built on a shared enemy, would go on to reshape the entire strategic map of the region, creating a new axis of power that the world would not begin to understand until years later. If you found this story about the hidden architecture of modern power compelling, perhaps you will be interested in our next report.